Hello, welcome to PodFic Galore. I'm your horrible online reader, Goldscythe. I read out loud fanfictions for you busy bees, free of charge and no strings attached. Today I will continue reading the Silmarillion / Lord of the Rings fic by myself called The Wraith of Himring. I hope you can at least try to enjoy my voice, and I will try my best for you with the equipment available to me. On with the show. The Wraith of Himring, Chapter 2, Hiciste. In Amon, a mother is weeping. In her arms is no living babe, but a carving of a red-streaked marble. Carving of her firstborn, so beautiful and happy. From amidst the wild red curls, a pair of green eyes look up, tears streaming down her freckled cheeks. Her gaze moves from the likeness of her two youngest, their forms cracked, red-stricken from their chests, black marring the other's face. One by one, she had watched her lovingly carved marble statues become streaked with red, more and more, cracks appearing. That was how she knew. How her babies had faced their deaths. Each crack tore at her heart. How the once so glowing, almost golden-streaked statue of her second-born had become duller and duller until the cracks were almost blood-red. He had barely finished the fifth carving when he heard a crack behind her and whirled around, seeing how the hand of the statue of firstborn cracked and then fell, shattering onto the workshop's granite floor. It had taken her months to continue her work. More cracks and more blood red appeared until there were only two. She had thought she had no more tears to shed, but every time she was wrong. She flinched as thunder clapped outside, only now realizing the day had grown dark. With growing horror, she saw the two remaining forms of her sons grow dark and their hands blacken. Her firstborn shattering even more. No, please. Not all of them, she had cried out hoarsely, but there was nobody to hear her. She doubted the Valar cared. They were forsaken. The next lightning struck illuminated a statue in the corner. Anger welled up within her breast, and she set the marble babe onto the carved cradle she had made just for him. As yet another flash illuminated the workshop and made even the lamps grow dim, she grabbed a hammer from the wall. You did this to us. You destroyed our house with your own hands. You let your mind be clouded, and what did it do? They died. One by one. How could you? She screamed at the motionless marble statue, taking heavy steps after another towards it, swinging the hammer. The statue cracked under the weight of her blow. And another. Your stupid obsessions! Your damn jewels! We had 7 jewels! The last scream and a swing of the hammer shattered the likeness of her husband. You murdered them all! Yet another heave of the hammer, and the hands holding a circlet of gold shattered, the circlet now mangled, twisted, gems skittering across the floor and falling into the rubble. Until the statue was just shards and slivers, she kept pounding it, marble dust sticking to her tear-stained face. You took them from me. Maklar stood on the ruins of the highest tower, silver eyes dull, wrapped in an old cloak, shielding himself from the wind. He gazed in the direction he knew Valinor was, where his poor Amilla was. Did she know? Had someone brought her news of the demise of Fëanor? Of her children, one by one? Driven by the oath until they were nothing but wrecks? Wrecks haunted by memories and the overpowering need to do what was bidden. The voice of their Atar telling them over and over they needed the Silmarils. The clouding of their vision, the roar of blood in their ears. He let the tears be dried by the wind, cold as it was. How long had he braved the elements there, on Himring? He had lost track of time long ago. It was just him and his brother. On occasion, he had made it onto the shore, using snares to catch small game to survive. With a sigh, he bid silent farewell to the direction of Amon, as a goodbye to his mother, to everything, before turning to make his way down again. Upon entering the room where his brother lay, he caught a flash of memory, of the night after Vindicana's death, the desperation pouring out of his brother. How something died within him as well that day. How he had to bury his face into the pillow as his brother held him. He let the memory fade and sat beside his brother, brushing his hair gently. It was growing duller, the skin paler, scars and freckles standing out even more. With stiff and scarred fingers, Maglor picked up the rag that was soaked in water, using it to moisten his brother's dry and cracked lips out of habit. "I don't know what to do, Nelio," he whispered into the silence of the room. "I truly don't. I'm not you. Nor am I Fingon." He shuddered as he heard the storm beginning to rise outside. Yet another storm to endure. "Forgive me, Nelio," he rasped as a distant rumble heralded the arrival of thunder. Autumn was far, the forest a myriad of shades of flame speckled with the dark green of the evergreens. Maglor was stumbling along the brambles, looking for his snares, but so far he hadn't found them. Letting out a sigh of defeat, he leaned his forehead against the tree next to where he recalled his snare having been. There was nothing. He was alone, yet in his delirium he could almost see Tuelka appear from the bushes, dangling some wild game with a grin. A crunch of twigs brought him out of his reverie, and he looked up to see a bear looking at him, equally bewildered, the lips of the great animal stained purple. There had to be an area growing blueberries this far deep in the forest. He felt the need to incline his head to the animal, who just looked at him, deep dark eyes seemingly staring into his shattered soul. The bear gruffed, tossed his head towards whence it came, continuing on the journey. "Thank you," Maglor whispered, struggling to follow the tracks. The blueberries were small, but almost as delicious as the large berries in Valinor. They just got them rarely after they moved into Formenos. He ate slowly, almost cursing if he dropped but a single one. He took out a birch bark box he had managed to find from the corridors and storage rooms left hidden within Himring. He looked at it first. Maybe it had been Morio's handiwork. Or from the twins. He sobbed and felt his heart constrict. Where were the two children of his younger brothers? Morio's little son with the Edain Haleth? Or Gurufin's pride and joy, Tvelpe? Where were his and Maedros' foster twins? The boys he had grown to love like the elflings he'd never have. His spells had long ago forsaken him. There was nothing left. A scream made him almost drop his foraged berries. He quickly shoved the box into a simple bag he had been carrying, scanning the forest if he heard it again. Then he could smell it. Orcs. His blood began to boil. The scream had been no orc scream, but of either Edain or Elven. He knew he should go back, but as sounds of fighting began, he grabbed his twin blades, despite the pain in his hands, carefully picking his way towards the commotion. He saw a small band of elves try to ward off orcs, who were desperate enough to stalk the forest under the protection of the canopy of leaves. As an Eleth with ashen blonde hair tripped and her ankle was grabbed, something within Maglor's Fea began to scream. He snarled as his old battle mask came on, narrowing his focus only to the sounds of the orcs, their harsh breathing, heavy movements, and black blood. Not red elven blood, but black. With a gurgling sound, the orc that had attempted to grab the Eleth fell under his blades. He jerked back as something thudded against him, and that drove him to another attack. He didn't know did the other elves, Moriquendi maybe, fight alongside him, but when the roar of blood finally surpassed, he staggered. He looked down to where he vaguely remembered a hit, to see a thin shaft of a black arrow with poor fletching sticking out. Oh. But where was the pain? He looked up, numb, as one of the elves, face speckled with black, approached him carefully, speaking to him. He blinked, not understanding a word. Only then did he look around. He saw small huts, a tiny village or a community. It blended almost perfectly into the woods, that he hadn't seen it before. Once again, he was spoken to, but understood none. As the elf before him laid down his sword, someone gently reached towards him, taking his knives, setting them aside, and taking his back from him. He didn't know what was going on until the forest spun in his eyes. There was a great whoosh in his head, as he felt someone snap the arrow tip, and with a swift yank, the shaft pulled from his side. Everything faded into darkness, and the world spun. He groaned as his side was on fire. A gentle voice hushed him. His forehead was brushed with something damp and cool. He tried to move, but he was carefully pushed down. It was the same Eleth he had saved initially. She smiled at him gently and kept wiping his face and neck, humming a tune quietly. As she put the rag away, she took a bowl of something from a table nearby, then took his right hand, settling it to her lap. She turned his palm up, and as he tried to pull it away, she held his wrist until he stopped pulling. She then smiled, taking some of the greenish ointment onto her fingers, and began to rub it into his palm, massaging the scarred tissue as gently as she could. She continued the treatment on his other hand as well, just humming along to whatever tune was in her head. It was ever-changing, and something about it reminded Maglor of something. Of someone. She brought him broth soon, speaking to him softly, almost akin to a wild animal. Maybe they had seen the feral side of his, the battle persona. He thought it sounded a mixture of Telerin and Sindarin, but he couldn't grasp a single word. He managed to drink some of the broth before his strength left him, and sleep claimed him. He fell asleep with her humming in his head. When he came to again, his whole body ached and throbbed. He felt icy cold and he could barely see anything. The dimly lit cabin was quite warm. He was currently being swaddled into more blankets and furs, the worried look betraying what was going on. He must be running a fever. Poison? Infection? Nelio! He rasped suddenly, trying to bolt up, but with surprising strength she pushed him down, hands on her shoulders, looking worried. He was trying to insist on returning to his home, slurring his words, trying to get his tongue to work, but to no avail. She kept pressing him down, looking almost desperate, until he began to weep. She then gathered him in her arms, pressing her soft body against his, letting him cling to her simple dress. She pressed his face against her chest and rocked them, humming quietly. Whenever he surfaced from his fever delirium, she was there, with hot broth or a cool cloth, gentle touches and soothing smiles. He couldn't keep the track of time, but as her clothes changed from lighter earthy tones to darker tones and to woolen, he knew time was passing, and yet his strength was quickly sapped by simple things. He often wept, calling up to his brother, that much he remembered. He recalled her repeating Nelio, preceded and followed by words with questioning intonation, her brows raised questioningly. Yet he did not understand what she was asking. Nelio? Nelio is my brother, he said one time. He couldn't continue. He began to sob, screaming in his destroyed voice, screaming for his brother, for forgiveness, for his losses. He vaguely heard others enter the hut, but nobody else approached him but her. She stayed with him, kneeling on the bed, holding him for a long time until he calmed down. She gently wiped his face, but not with a cloth this time, but with her bare hands. Her fingers were cool on his heated skin, and she pressed a kiss on his forehead, speaking to him quietly, and the only word he thought he recognized was Elbereth. When he saw snow fall outside the hut through the window, he paled. No. I've left him. He's alone. He resigned to his fate. She nursed him to relative health and kept him fed. Some of the Elin brought him clothes that fit and were warm and soft, yet practical. His knives were kept in good condition for him. She brushed his hair often and braided it for him. She was always humming, and he started to call out to her by the name he gave her in Sindarin, Linwen. She had chuckled at him calling her that, and from her tone figured she was asking his. He almost replied, but knew he had most likely given himself away by calling out for Nelio. Still, he couldn't give his name. Not the Sindarin. Gone. Her smile was brilliant, and every time he tried to leave, she was there, following him. The way he was treated in the little community during the early weeks of winter made him realize they were all refugees, a band of elves from different groups. He suspected them to be Avari, but they did not indicate knowing him. They often admired his raven hair, the waves in it, and he had guessed that since she braided his hair similarly to theirs, they considered him part of them. Just another soul, but a fierce warrior who would keep them safe and fight alongside them. I'm sorry, Nelio. I haven't meant to, he mumbled as he yet again tried to leave towards the shores, to see if the sea had frozen enough or if his hidden raft was still there. He never made it far when Linwen had appeared, looking worried, carrying a bag, intent on following him. He couldn't take her with him. Where I go, you cannot follow, Linwen. I need to go to him. She would just cock her head to the side and look at him with blue-gray eyes. No matter how many times, when he tried, she was there. Then he realized the way people looked at them, gentle smiles, and how she was often questioned and she shook her head, how the 2 new elflings in the community were received with much joy. They were expecting him to wed her, probably. She was behaving like a wife. That made his heart ache. He had forsaken his beloved in Aman. He had now forsaken his brother. As silent tears made their way down his cheeks, she kept looking at him, still with a travel pack on her shoulders and a winter cloak around her. He turned back towards the community. She was not going to leave him, and he didn't want her to see Maedhros. He was the most recognizable elf on Arda. She would know, and for some reason, he did not want them, her, to fear him. She would. They all would. They would realize he was a cursed kinslayer, nothing but a relic of the terrors. He stayed the winter until the solstice. End of chapter 2. Stay tuned.